Today I just want to share with you some of the things we have underscored, we emphasized in the class last night. One of the things we learned in the class is that, one of the points I have emphasized that from the sutta is very clear that in order to practice the Dhamma, particularly in order to practice meditation, we need to understand the whole context of spiritual practice. A meditation cannot be done as just a mere technique, isolated from the totalistic context. That's the point I mean. We saw that, for instance, the Satipatṭhāna, people are here very crazy about all that, which is actually a good sign. I should say very interested, keen interested in the practice of Satipatṭhāna. But we have seen that first we have to understand the background, the purpose, and the way it is done. Firstly, it is to be noted that the Buddha was speaking to the full-timers, speaking to the bhikkhus around him. And these bhikkhu, these monks, they had a very definite goal in their mind. And they have a very definite lifestyle. These are important things to be noted. Now that doesn't mean that today if we want to practice meditation or Buddhism, you've got to be monks, you could be full-timers. But actually everybody should be a full-timer in your own different capacity, in a different way. There's no excuse about it. Meditation is not just a private part of your life. It's your whole life. This is what is meant by being a full-timer. Well, you may not do it as, successfully or as well as maybe a monk or a nun, simply because the monk or nun is fully devoted to all the practices in detail. But in your way, in your position, you should think of Buddhism as your whole life. So I was talking about being a Buddhist, let's say, engineer, a Buddhist teacher, a Buddhist businessman, a Buddhist lawyer, a Buddhist doctor, etc., a Buddhist scholar, you see. So if you are serious about Buddhism, it's Buddhism that should come first. It's the Dharma that should come first. And always orientate yourself with Dhamma, or with the triple gem, Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, as the center. That is what I mean by also commitment. That is what's meant by going for refuges. That's why we have this ceremony, and the Chinese preserve the ceremony very well. That is the going for refuges as a serious act, in which you commit yourself totally, not partly, not partially, but totally to the practice of the Dhamma in your own way, however imperfectly you are doing it. We are all imperfect. That's fine, that's okay. And we fail, as I say, we fail every day because we all have, we can't avoid it. We all have, until we are enlightened, we all have craving, we all have hatred, we all have ignorance. But our whole life, even in the midst of our problems, in the midst of our struggle, in the midst of our unhappiness, our so-called depression, a term that is common in Hong Kong, in the midst of all this, you feel that your life is a life of Dhamma. It should be like that. So when we read in the sutta that the teaching, the meditation method is explained to the bhikkhu, the full-timers, although it doesn't mean that you have to be monks and nuns and leave your home. Certainly it doesn't mean that, right? But it does mean that the Dhamma should be at the center of your life. Your whole life is a life of a Buddhist. Okay? So this is one thing. And then the goal also. So we are told that, you see, the Satipatṭhāna is a path, a marker leading to the purification of sentient being. For the Visuddhiya, that is for Visuddhi. And for even nibbāna, nothing less than that. Today, however, we see meditational practices, mindfulness practice, being emphasized as just a technique, like an aspirin, like a medicine that you take to counteract your headache. So the Satipatṭhāna practices are now being employed as a technique, emphasized as a technique, as an isolated mechanical technique, you see, for stress reduction. All this does not mean that I object to the application of mindfulness practice for our mental health. I think it's a good thing, it's a good sign in a way. But what it does mean is that we have to reflect deeply the meaning, the manner in which we apply mindfulness practice for example, our psychological welfare or stress reduction. If you define your limit, your scope, you know, okay, I'm just applying that much and that is what I can do for my stress reduction. And do not overclaim, do not distort, and be aware of the context. That is fine, that's good. But when you go beyond that scope, you have to be very cautious, because you're entering into the domain of the unconscious. When you meditate, it's not just a technique that helps you, like driving a car, like using a computer, all these are convenient facilities, convenient for your operation, daily operation. It's a process, it's a psycho-spiritual process. It's taking place unconsciously. Many things are happening in you. And these things can happen in a way that you don't understand, in a way that appear to be negative to you. For example, you feel that you're more aware of your desires. You're more aware of your anger. You feel more problems as you practice more seriously. That is natural, because many things are happening from your unconscious. So in order to deal with this psycho-spiritual process, which is not just merely a physiological process of just reducing your stress, that's the important point. You must understand the context. What shall I do now as a Buddhist? What is my goal? How do I counteract these things? What are the things that can help me? For example, I bring out faith in the Buddha. I practice to be kinder, to bring out more compassion to the world. So I find higher meaning than what I experienced in my depression, for example. I find higher meaning for my existence in the Dhamma. And I'm uplifted by my faith in the Buddha. And I'm uplifted by my vows. Things that seem impossible, I use the power of vow, the facility, the faculty of vow, to uplift me, to promote me to higher levels. And I do my meditation regularly. That's a very important thing. You can't solve your problem just doing halfway. Sometimes it's bad. Do 1 day and 10 days you don't do it. It can be bad also. So, in other words, in brief, it requires a lot of understanding. You see, a lot of commitment, a lot of seriousness in meditation. So we saw all this in just 2-3 paragraphs that we read last night. So remember, what is Satipatṭhāna? What is it for? The Buddha has said it is a path for purification of being. It's a path for the atikamma, for the transcendence of sorrow, in other words, of the human predicament. It's as serious as that, as fundamental as that, but often we forget. And when we use them at our level, within our defined scope, as I mentioned earlier, then we still have to be cautious of the overall context without falling into trouble. You see? Then the second point we have learned is, of course, we discussed so many things. We discussed very important terms, how to understand the word Satipatṭhāna. What is meant by Patthāna? Is it Patthāna, or is it from the Sanskrit Upasthana, and so on? You see, and what is meant by Ekayano? Clearly, it's an adjective. It's not a noun. So maybe it's not so correct to say this is the only way. It's an adjective qualifying makko. Ekayano is in the nominative case, masculine, nominative, makko also. So it's describing that part, and therefore I think it's more appropriate to translate as direct part, a part that is directly, so that it's adjectival to the part. So anyway, there are so many things we discuss. We look at the Chinese and how this understanding is reflected in the ancient Chinese translations. So there's a lot of things we can learn. Another thing we learn is the fact that meditation practice, Satipatthāna practice, involves the issue of lifestyle. You see, you can't say, well, like it has been stressed in some meditational movement in modern times. All you need is the correct method. All you need is the correct technique. Everything will be fine. The technique takes care of everything, and that is proof wrong in our experiences. I must say, I might add, in my own experiences also as a young man. I went through all these periods of being very idealistic and joined meditation movements that stress on physiological benefits and so on, that stresses on the scientific technique, etc. But I became disillusioned. So I had explained my experiences previously to you, but here just I want to emphasize one point we learned. I hope the point that should stay in your mind, and that is meditation practice involves a change of lifestyle. You cannot divorce it from the contextual lifestyle. What we were told when we were young, when we joined those meditation movement, was that you go ahead and be yourself, and you don't have to change anything. If you believe in a creator God, you go ahead and continue. Okay? If you are materialistic in outlook, you go ahead. But that is very wrong. It involves lifestyle, according to the Buddhist teaching. Yeah? And we saw that the bhikkhu is told to meditate, having gone to where? Aranya kato. Rukka mula kato. Can you remember? Shunya akara kato. All this means the environment, your life, in which, your total life in which you do your meditation is very, very important. So of course, again, it doesn't mean today you must abandon your home, go to the forest, literally find an empty house, only then you can meditate successfully. It doesn't mean that. Of course, this can help you. It depends on something, whether you're a monk, whether you live in the village, whether you have other responsibilities to carry out, and your mission to carry out even as a monk. Not all monks have the opportunity to stay so much in the forest environment, for instance. So certainly it doesn't mean that. But what it does mean is that in a very serious sense, your meditation practice involves the question of lifestyle. You have to begin to change your lifestyle, and that can take place very, very naturally. Often you can't just force yourself quickly, immediately, abruptly, you drop everything, you drop all your friends, your circle of friends, all this. Of course, as you develop as an individual, you end up, for instance, having different circles of friends. You see, friends that talk to you about the Dhamma, that share with you about the Dhamma practice, and mutually you encourage one another, and that kind of friends will attract you more, will help you more. So in a very natural way, you develop like that. So it's not a question of abruptly, forcibly, unreasonably change your lifestyle, but it does involve a change in lifestyle in a very natural way. And this change, this evolution takes place sometimes without us noticing it too much. But still, of course, we also have to make very conscious, mindful steps. If it is important for me to practice the Dhamma, to practice meditation, then I must choose the places that I frequent instead of the pubs, instead of the parties, instead of the companions that bring me around the cities, leading me into wild lives. I want to go more to the Buddhist centers. I want to be near the Buddhist library. I want to feel the presence of the Buddha in the shrine. I want to be in touch with, my fellow Buddhist practitioners. All these things should develop very naturally. While at the same time, we must mindfully make some steps. So the question of lifestyle cannot be avoided. Coming back to my observation today on the movement of the emphasis on mindfulness, stress meditation, and they deliberately trying to leave out the whole context of Buddhism, I think, to say the least, it is very unwise. It's not a question of being grateful or not to Buddhism. It's fine that they can remain ungrateful, but if they don't look into the context and understand why the method was introduced by Buddha, ultimately they are inviting problems for themselves in a psycho-spiritual sense. That's why we have seen very good friends, who are actually even Buddhist, highly intelligent, and who practice a lot about, and even they taught mindfulness practice. But ultimately, what happened? They have so much problems psychologically that even some committed suicide. How do you explain that? Because these are negative things that are happening to you, and you don't know how to handle them. You don't know what they mean to you. You can't relate to your own existence. So, while I admire and I agree to a large extent that it is a useful thing, it's a good thing to attract more people who are not necessarily Buddhists, who don't want to label themselves Buddhists, that's fine, So in that way, we don't need to always emphasize the label, the title, the name Buddhism. So that aspect is good, is to be praised. But on the other hand, we should not overdo it in an unrealistic way. You can look at Buddhism without being a Buddhist even. Look into the doctrines of Buddhism. What does it mean? When the Buddha says it in the suttas, how do I translate this statement into modern terms to me, as someone who is not yet fully committed to Buddhism, for instance? So you have to look into it and understand the context. And that's what is not done today. That's why even such a well-intending movement can cause serious psychological problems to the practitioners, and we have seen that. I don't even need to prove to you. We have seen that even in Hong Kong itself. On the other hand, of course, I'm also pleased to hear that some of this movement have introduced the dimension of compassion, for example. That's something good. You don't have to call it Buddhism. But the fact that you reflect on why, the purpose of practicing mindfulness, for instance, why do I do it? You know, it's not just for myself, but it's for what you might say, a kind of existential involvement in human existence. That I'm a human existing in the human predicament. I want to transcend my human predicament, and that is transcending the human predicament of all beings. You combine, you link it up always with all beings, compassion. That is something positive. Maybe something more should be done in that direction. To introduce what you might call, for want of a better term, a spiritual dimension into all this practice. Otherwise, if mindfulness is just taught, as a totally mechanical technique, a mere technique, totally isolated from its context of living, of lifestyle, of background, of purpose, then they are inviting problems. There will be problem in one way or another. We have seen a lot of it. I remember that we had, actually I was behind the organizing of a conference on Buddhist meditation, and book has been produced, the white cover book that you can see now at Hong Kong U, when I was still teaching there. And originally I wanted it to be more, truly, shall I say, a scholarly kind of conference, but with a spiritual purpose, and not this kind of very superficial so-called application aspect, although I respect the aspect. Anyway, I agreed that that should be part of it. And I think the founder or someone associated with the founder of the mindfulness movement was a speaker, one of the speakers. I think one associate founder or somebody like that. And I questioned and asked the point about what about the context, and you don't provide context, and negative things have happened, and that man could not really answer. When I said the context, immediately he said, "Yeah, I know in the monastery." I don't mean just because I'm a monastic and I ask a question, I'm not saying that meditations must be done only in the monastery. It works only for the monastery. I don't mean that at all. But without facing that, the context means the whole living, the issue of lifestyle, the issue of commitment, the emotional involvement, you see, and the joy that you need in your struggle, and the context of spiritual fellowship. There's so many things in relation to the point about context, but this man immediately said, "Yeah, I know what you mean, the monastery." I don't mean that at all. So the impression I get is that they just avoid it. And I heard that some people say, we don't mention Buddhism because it's wrong to do that. It's just like Newton discovered gravity, and so now when we teach the law of gravity, we don't have to say that it is discovered by Newton. Of course you don't need to, but actually people do. In schools, in universities, students are taught that this was discovered by Newton, is one of the Newtonian laws of physics. Just as an example, within the whole context of classical physics, for instance. And that is to say, as distinct from or opposed to, say, quantum physics or physics of Einstein physics of relativity, for example. So it does help to point out the context. But when one argues like that, it's not quite right to simply say, we don't want to mention Buddhism because it's like the law of gravity. We don't need to attribute it to Newton. It's their own unwisdom. So, these are important things we learn from the sutta. That is why let me explain to you why I have decided to start a course like this. You see, I have enough to teach. When I was at Hong Kong, I simply didn't have a chance because I was occupied with so many important courses. I have to teach Mahayana. It was a compulsory course, And then I had to teach Sanskrit because actually there was nobody who was able to teach at that time in those subjects. And I devised my own textbook and my own style of teaching and introducing Buddhism completely into Sanskrit learning. Things like that. One of my missions, you see. So then because of the question of spiritual practice, for me, Abhidharma and Yogacara is really important. So when I start teaching this subject, I simply don't have a chance to look at other subjects. But after coming here, I have my own space, as it were. And I can leave some of those subjects to others who are teaching. And of course, I also have to still train the assistants and to do some part myself. But I have a little bit more time now, you see, to emphasize what I need to emphasize. That is learning from the actual teaching of the Buddha. And as I said yesterday, and I've said also last week, it's not a question of promoting a particular sect, whether we call it Theravada or Pali tradition. But it's a question of emphasizing the return to the actual teaching of the historical Buddha. It so happened that the materials are preserved, or at least largely preserved, in the Pali tradition. It's a question of going back to the root. It's not a question of being sectarian. What we want is real Buddhism. In fact, today I always emphasize going beyond all these different Buddhist sects. Today is time for us to unite all forms of Buddhism. And I believe that one important thing is going back to early Indian Buddhism. And for the Chinese, the important thing is to emphasize, Buddhism, promoting Buddhism for all Chinese. That is to say, Chinese of all different traditions. Whether you follow Pure Land, whether you follow Yogacara school, whether you follow Zen school, Chan school. Think of the glory, think of the value of the Buddhist tradition, the Chinese Buddhist tradition, not a particular sect. They all have their merits, they all have their good points. While promoting each individual branches, the important thing is to unite the whole of Chinese Buddhism. This is one aspect. The other aspect is to unite the whole of Buddhism, and that is by going back to the root, Indian Buddhism. And that is why we are emphasizing these things.